you'd have robots doing jobs that probably starting were made safe for humans, but then you could probably kind of reformulate that to do things that would be dangerous for a human, but certainly not dangerous for a robot.
I'm not going to go there, right? Robots have no conscience these days, so maybe in the future they will, but I would rather sacrifice a robot than a human. And then maybe we can go to do higher level job, right? So again, a lot of people are concerned about AI, but when we think about the internet, when internet came, we were wondering what are humans going to do, and we find other things to do. So I see the same thing happening as we use more robots. We'll go and do more advanced or different tasks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Altium OnTrack Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Peterson. Today, we're talking with Gabriel Guglielmi, VP of Global Product Management at Infinite Electronics. Gabriel is a new guest on the podcast, and I'm very happy to have him here today to talk about everything that's going on at Infinite Electronics. Gabriel, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, and looking forward to this discussion.
So, as I mentioned, you are a new guest, and I always like hearing people's stories as far as how they got into the electronics industry. So if you could, tell everyone who's listening your background and how you got involved in electronics.
Interestingly, my major at school, and I'm from France originally, was in mechanical engineering, so not really electronics. And I started my first job in the semiconductor industry, ST Microelectronics. And I guess I really liked it. It's a fast-paced, changing industry. And so I sticked around for like 15 years into the semiconductor industry, starting from finance, in fact, going all the way to managing a product division. And then after 15 years, I guess I decided to change course and I moved into the interconnect world, where the transition was made easy by the fact that that company was doing a test socket for semiconductor. So that was the linkage. And then since then, I guess for the next 15 years, I've been now into the interconnect industry in various companies, mostly around the product management role, covering sometimes R&D and development as well. And had also a few responsibilities for general management. So having a full P&L and run a company. So that's about my background. So all my career into the electronics, although I'm not a double E.
No, that's fair. And it's always interesting when people move from semiconductors to something broader like systems or PCB.
Yes. Yes.
I think in I guess in pop culture, or maybe just kind of broadly for folks who aren't technical, when they think about electronics, the first place they go to is probably the chips and the semiconductors, and that tends to get all the attention.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, when I was into the semiconductor industry, I did not know much about interconnect. And my view was, these are simple things. The core, right, is really doing these semiconductor chips. And we were pushing the boundary all the time. So new advanced node, advanced packaging, new testing methods. So it's true at the time the interconnect was not evolving as fast, but interestingly, in the past few years, as the systems tend to be smaller, more dense, or faster, the interconnect play a role, I would say, at least equal role versus semiconductor, because if you've got a chip that works very fast, but there's nothing to connect these chips to the outside world, it's kind of useless. So I've seen the complexity of interconnect increasing. And if you look at data center, it's a perfect example, right? So where people start now to put together the processing unit into the rack with how do I get the signal out of the rack? And how do I get the signal outside the building and to the different campus? So long story short, I think the interconnect have become as critical, as challenging as semiconductor.
Yeah, whenever I tell someone that I work on PCBs, I say the same thing that you just mentioned about interconnects regarding the importance of PCBs and kind of what the whole point is, and to allow the chips and everything to talk to each other. And if they can't do that, it's totally pointless.
Truly, there used to be before only one chip. It was easy, but now there are multiple chips. They are combined together. So PCB and any supporting hardware is part of the system. In fact, it's now a system. Nobody's interested in having only one chip. Does do nothing.
So switching gears here just a little bit, you've got a lot of experience in the industry, and in your position currently at Infinite, I'm sure you're working with a lot of customers who are working in some of the most cutting edge, or maybe not necessarily cutting edge, but certainly most in focus areas in electronics, and one of those is in unmanned systems. So
Yes.
if you could give us the overview of everything that's happening in unmanned systems.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I've been involved into A&D, aerospace and defense, for a long time. And when you look at what was happening there, I mean, companies such as the prime contractors, Lockheed, Raytheon, L3Harris, they were developing platforms, but the time it used to take from, let's say, the first RFI to having the platform up and running was decades. The perfect example is F-35. I mean, F-35 we have been talking about that for like 20 years, maybe more. And so was used to a very long cycle. And then we go for the early samples, and then for qualification parts, and then for pre-production, and so on and so forth. And then suddenly we have this unmanned system, which are game changer, because the time is contracting from what used to be decades. I would say now is maybe a couple of years. And we are not at war, the US, but if I look at the Ukraine-Russia war conflict, they change the requirement weekly basis. So that's what really caught my attention, is a disruption in the industry. And I see the unmanned system disruption similar to what happened in the space with SpaceX, and at the time many other companies that we don't remember them because they disappear. But at the time, if you look at 20 years ago, the space industry was dominated by Boeing, United Launcher, and Ariane in France, or Europe, sorry, it's a European company. And they were very slow. It was taking years to develop a launcher. You had to book a slot to launch a satellite like 2 years before or many years before. And SpaceX with Elon Musk, they totally disrupt that industry to the point where now they reuse launcher. That was unbelievable at the time. I remember reading an article from the CEO of Arianespace who was doubting about that. So now what we think is normal with SpaceX or Amazon Leo or Virgin, I mean, the same, I would say, disruption, I would call it revolution, is happening in the unmanned system. And again, unmanned systems are not only about war machines or for the warfighter, but using the example of the conflict in Iran, they are disrupting the way we conduct battle. A 30K to 50K drone can take down installation. And to react to that, we have to counter with a $2 to $3 million missile. So basically, it's not economically viable to do that. And so these systems are really changing the course of the battlefield. But also, I like to point also in the civilian applications. So I don't think the civilian applications are attracting as much attention as they deserve. But a couple of examples, right? So law enforcement and first responder. Now we have a drone sitting at the top of the building in many cities. And when someone calls 911 or for the fire or for any type of incident, immediately the drone is going to fly above the scene and see what is happening there, so that then law enforcement or firefighter can decide what's the best course of action I should take to address the problem. So this is something that we don't talk too much about. So that's an example of, I would say, it's not like completely public, but it's civilian application. That's for our security and safety day to day, right? The second aspect, which is drone delivering goods. And so they are example of a company called Wing, which deliver drugs into remote areas for people who need the medicine. And otherwise it will take days and weeks to bring it there. But also think about you want to order something on Amazon, and in some cities you order and you select, not making any advertising here, but Prime Air, and you will see a drone showing up over your yard and dropping, I don't know, if a book that you buy or and anything that you buy from Amazon. So this is basically the beginning of what we call a low altitude economy. Now, a lot of things need to be settled, right? So drone cannot fly everywhere, but these are the interesting application. The last one, and I will pause, is also when you think about fire in the forest. How do you survey what's going on in the forest? How you can go quickly see what's happening? And also, unfortunately, in many parts of these countries, forests are subject to big fire. So you can use drones as, again, to alert the firefighter so that we can address fires at the very beginning.
Yeah, so it's interesting because the first time I had heard of any kind of like law enforcement adjacent application was when Nightscope first came out, and that was I think about 10 years ago at this point. And so law enforcement is kind of a natural progression of that. And then we've heard about drone delivery for a while, but I think that's people mostly associate that with like urban areas.
Yes.
But you've mentioned that there's, I think with the drone capabilities expanding, then the reach of these systems expands as well. Because you mentioned, remote areas, so rural and remote areas, and that makes a lot of sense too for an unmanned system to, provide that service to customers.
Yeah, in fact, it's easier into less populated areas, because one of the topic that need to be considered is drones are flying, but they may drop. And so, and by the way, they may drop not with intention, right? Just something breaks on the drone. So one of the limitations today to use drone in a populated area is regulation. So FCC has submitted a Part 108, which is a new regulation to how to fly drones into populated area. And so here really regulation will facilitate or not the use of drone. And the second aspect, obviously, for example, right, drone cannot fly over airport. So I'd make sure that the drone will not go there. And I'm not talking about someone doing that with intentionally to go to the airport, but how do you prevent that? What system you put in place to avoid this? And then also, if a drone has a mechanical problem, how do you put in place mitigation so that the drone will not drop on you? And for example, another regulation is putting a parachute, right? If the drone stop working, at least it would land safely somewhere. So there are a lot of things to consider, but think about the automotive when at the beginning of the 20th century. I don't think there was really no regulation on the road, right? You got your car, you're 40, you are driving on the road, and look at what has happened over the course of 100 years, right? So now we have all these different regulations, signage on the road, and habits. So I think that's what's going to happen with unmanned system and drones in the next few years. Difference, it's going to go much faster. It will not take 100 years to reach the popularity of cars.
One thing that's interesting about this is, this all kind of evolved from the early 2000s with drones being deployed for military use, right? And mostly in the Middle East. And that has eventually transitioned into civilian applications like you're describing here. So, how do those designs at the military level inform how engineers approach a civilian application? I mean, when you think of military hardware, you think, it needs to be ultra reliable and, withstand, mechanical issues and vibration and possibly an explosion. And, that requires a different level of engineering than what you might do in, a typical civilian product or commercial product.
But I think this is changing completely. So if you look at drones, and I will go fast, you have the very small one, group one, and all the way to what we have seen, the Reaper, MQ-9, which is definitely the large one, like group 5, they are only military. because they are basically almost close to a aircraft. And if you look at what GA and Anduril are developing with collaborative combat aircraft, these are jet fighter with nobody inside. So these definitely are military. They should be rugged. They have to survive many different situations, from extreme heat to extreme cold to sitting in the air for a day or 2 or 3 days, whatever it is. But what's happening is now the reverse. If you look at the smaller one, there is a program called the Drone Dominance Program, initiated by the Department of War and inside the DOW, the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU, which is recommending to start from a commercial drone. So really the military are looking for low cost, reliable drones, and it's flipping the coin. Right now, the commercial drones are the ones that are moved to military. The big difference, obviously, is that commercial drones, civilian drones, don't have explosive, but definitively, the military are looking for using as much as possible COTS component, like in the commercial world. The only big difference, although there is also convergence there, military do not want to use components from certain country, but the same has happened in the commercial drone. I mean, the FCC at the end of last year has officially banned any new model and component coming from a country in country. So there is a lot of commonalities between a Group 1, Group 2 drone for military and a civilian drone. And in fact, the military wants to use the commercial one for their own use. And therefore, I should say we call it a dual use drone. So now people are designing a dual use, and depending on the situation, depending on if they are qualified by DOW or not, they're going to sell almost the same drone to commercial application and military application. If I can use an example, that's what Skydio does, right? They have a version that is used by the first responder, and then maybe a slightly different version for the military. And I would say the difference between military and commercial is commercial, you have to stick to frequency band if it's an RF drone. When it comes to military can use pretty much whatever frequency band they want. So therefore it has an implication there. But again, it's changing component. The architecture will remain the same. I mean, drones are going to be 3D printed, the body. When it comes to power, battery, they may be using the same one. Yes, the antennas, the transmit and receive may be a bit different. And obviously the software might be different, as military like to use more and more autonomous drone. But that's kind of the difference. But the base will be very similar.
Yeah, that's also, I think, really interesting why you might start from a civilian application. I think there's a few reasons, right? One is that obviously it's proven in terms of its flight ability. I think number two is the supply chain, right? If it's a civilian drone, they're probably already manufacturing 1 million of them, so you can probably get another 1 million for military usage.
That's a challenge. In the commercial world, only a few companies are really at scale, and they're mostly Chinese. You may have heard about DJI and Hotel. So one of the challenge for both commercial drone in the US and to comply with the FCC mandate in the military is to find a supply chain that is friendly. Friendly supply chain means we can source the components from friendly countries, friendly to the US, and as well as or US. And that's how and why, and company like Infinite can and other ones can really bring a value is how do we build that entire ecosystem supply chain around unmanned system, because today it doesn't really exist in the US.
Yeah, there's a few people I've talked to that see this as a major challenge, and there's one company that is really doing their best to try and meet this challenge, and that company is Neros. And if Olaf is listening right now, you've got an open invitation to come onto the show and talk to me. I've talked to Olaf at last year's PCB West event. And it was really great to talk to him briefly. But yeah, I think there's some companies that see this as a real major challenge and are willing to take it on. And I think there's a lot of people out there who say, you can't do it in the U.S. You can't build that supply chain without a Chinese supplier.
I think you talk about challenges. I see that as a massive opportunity. I mean, there is no reason that we are not able, as a nation, together with friendly countries, to build that supply chain. I think today the biggest choke point are batteries, electrical motor, and flight controller. But I think if you look at China, they were able to do that over several years. So we should be able to do that. And DOW, with their drone dominance program, are trying to help there. Because obviously, if you build that supply chain, like Neros is doing, but you don't get orders, then who's going to invest, right? So, but definitively, if DOW or first responder or whoever start to buy at scale, and just give you a sense today, 80% of the drone, it's civilian drones, are coming from China. So, and new models are forbidden. So as people are going to replace them, there will be a massive opportunity there, as well as we keep using more and more drones in our day-to-day life, because there are multiple use cases that I've not talked about. Like, think about a cell tower. Who wants to climb in winter on a cell tower and take the risk of falling down? So with a drone, you can fly a drone, see what happens, and even you can imagine a drone with tools there doing some fix and repair. Same on the power line. How do we inspect power line in critical area where, especially in California, where there is fire, right? And we all know that some fire started by the power line. Can fly drone there. So there is, I want to be optimistic, and I see good progress. You mentioned Neros. There are other companies, including Infinite, where we are building that supply chain. So it's not happening overnight, but I think we can get it done in a few years.
In a few years, that does seem pretty optimistic, but I do see that I do see it as that it's a big opportunity, and I think the impetus is really there when you start to get an entire department of the government to get behind it and really make it happen.
And I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago, and also at one of the largest unmanned system show in Europe, and Europeans have the same concern. They want to build a supply chain, an ecosystem that is also coming from friendly nations, including US, where I know there is a bit of a little tension between Europe and US, but when it comes to addressing this problem, I'm sure we will be all adult in the room and fix that. So again, there is no reason why we cannot produce millions and millions of drones like China does. Okay, so some will be easier. For example, for Infinite, we have moved some of our product from the forbidden countries to friendly countries or US. It has taken us 6 months. Some may take longer. I think one of the biggest challenge will be the rare earth material in the magnet inside the electric motor. But the good news is that there are initiatives in the US to start mining them. There are initiatives in Australia. So many countries are doing so. Yeah, maybe magnet will take more than a few years, but I don't expect to be it will be much less than 10 and maybe 5.
Okay. That's
we'll talk in 5 years and see if I was right or not.
I was just going to say that's a good goal to set for hopefully for in the next 5 years. We can have you come back on and talk about it when we actually make some progress.
Yes.
Shifting gears maybe to something that's a little more lively. and focusing, I guess, more on the civilian end, what are some of the most interesting civilian applications for unmanned systems that you've seen? Maybe what are some of your favorites?
I really love the one where drones are used to deliver medicine. And I think I already talked about that company, Wing, and that's really saving life. And because it goes to remote area, but we can think about the same in the US. In the US, there are also very remote areas. So how do you ensure the same service for everybody? So that's interesting, right? When it comes to health and of people. So I really like this. Then there are also cool things. You mentioned about the CEO of Neros. I met him once. People are doing race with drones. So that's kind of interesting, right? So racing in a 3D. And how basically you can see what's happening with virtual reality, right? I think it's interesting you're using a mask or a VR, whatever it is, and you are piloting in real life. So that interaction between where you are and what you do far away, not that far away. So I like races, so I found this very interesting. But also, drones are used a lot into agriculture. So how do you optimize the crop? How you be able to detect how dry the ground is or humidity is, and then take the appropriate actions. Again, food safety is really interesting. But another thing that I like to go to, and it's a humanoid robot. If you look at an unmanned system, especially with the adoption of AI and being autonomous, that's a robot, essentially. And it's very cool initiative done by a few companies to create a humanoid robot. And why is it cool? First, technology is cool because it's not easy to reproduce a human. We take it for granted, but if you look at the complexity of our end, that's one of the things that is most difficult for a robot to achieve, is how to grab object. And I would call a robot a unmanned ground system. And so when you think about us rebuilding our ecosystem in the US, building the supply chain, moving factory, I don't think we have the manpower to do that. If you look at the active population in the US, it's at best stable, but I think it may be declining. And I was listening to a professor of economy at Northwestern saying that our population is shrinking. At the same time, we want to bring factories and producing goods. How are you going to do that? I think the answer is very simple: humanoid robot. China has already done that. Why China has done that? China is very pragmatic. They have also a massive population issue with the one-child policy. And how cool is it to have a robot first doing things that cannot be done without them because we don't have the people, and then robot doing things that we don't want to do because lifting heavy stuff, doing repetitive tasks, I really like these applications. So, and a lot of startups, sometimes bigger than startups, addressing that market. But it's fascinating. For me, that's a really, really good application of unmanned ground system in the future.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, and especially things you'd mentioned earlier, like infrastructure monitoring, right? And that's an unsafe job. Certainly applies in industrial environments as well. You could have robots doing jobs that probably starting were made safe for humans, but then you could probably kind of reformulate that to do things that would be dangerous for a human, but certainly not dangerous for a robot.
Yes, and I'm not going to go there, right? Robots have no conscience these days, so maybe in the future they will, but I would rather sacrifice a robot than a human. And so that's and then maybe we can go to do higher level job, right? So again, a lot of people are concerned about AI, but when we think about the internet, when internet came, we were wondering what are humans going to do, and we find other things to do. So I see the same thing happening as we use more robots. We'll go and do more advanced or different tasks and use the robot as, I would say, complementary to us. Hopefully we'll not go into the scenario of the Terminator, right, with Schwarzenegger, where robots replace humans. I will leave that to the science fiction and people writing books. But right now we are really talking about these systems to help us.
This is something that comes up over and over again, and I always have to remind people. This happened back in the early 1900s when industrialized farming was becoming a thing that became accessible to more and more farmers. And at that time, I think 30% or 50% of the population was farming, some ridiculous number of people. And of course, everyone worried, well, what are people going to do if they can't, if they're not growing their own food? And of course, we find other things to do that are much higher value.
By the way, we had so many people raising crops, but still we were lacking food, which was kind of an interesting situation, right? I mean, some years we had some sort of lack of basic ingredients. Now it happens, it may happen still, but mostly because we do war or something stupid, or we have disruption somewhere. Otherwise, I mean, when is the last time that we were lacking basic food? Maybe COVID, but that was I would say a very temporary situation. But if you look at across the history of humans, I mean, securing food has been a problem for centuries. We moved out of that situation. So I expect unmanned system and robots to solve some of our problems. Look at the work and comp. People doing the same job day after day. When they get 50, they start to have a lot of problems, physical problems. Robot will not have this problem. When the robot is over, replaced with a new robot. We cannot do that with humans.
Well, maybe unless cyborgs become a thing, then you they replace your bad back with a robotic one. Well, I like hearing from someone who sees the future as bright, because I tend to be a permanent optimist myself. I think one question I have for you then, as someone who is, of course, working at Infinite Electronics, is what is your company doing to support some of the things that we've been talking about?
Yes. So just a few words about Infinite, who we are. And so to explain what we are doing in that for unmanned system. But so Infinite, we are a company that owns 19 different companies. So we acquired these 19 companies over time, maybe over the course of 10 years. So we are a US company owned by private equity, and our focus is about high performance connectivity, product and solutions. So, and our job is to help our customers to solve all these connectivity problems. So our products start from cable assemblies, and in almost any systems, there is a cable. Let's think about a drone that use RF as a way of communicating. So there is a transmit ground terminal, could be small, could be big, depending on the drone. And then that the ground station communicates with drone through RF signals. So if you think about then the signal goes to the drone, there is an antenna there that receives the signals and then goes into the core of the drone to do some calculation and be able to follow a direction, to fight winds, to fight many things, right? So that's what we enable there in the communication. But then, drones need to be charged, right? When they are batteries. So we need some sort of Ethernet, USB type of products to be able to charge, the batteries. If you look at the more complex, drones such as Group 5, again, these are the collaborative combat aircraft or the Reaper type of things. These are small jet fighter. So in any jet fighter, you have a lot of wire harnessing, a lot of avionics box that do different tasks. And so all these boxes use connectivity component in them. How do you communicate all the way to a chip, right? You need to extract the signal from the board to outside the box, to the other box, and then the outside world. So we play on all the entire chain there. And we did not talk a lot about counter drone, and maybe we can do that later on. But counter drone, in my view, is even bigger than drones. And so a lot of counter drone systems stay on the ground. And so we to protect these systems against any type of lightning strike. We know that the grid is very unstable. So these micro fluctuations destroy electronics. So we have product to protect that as well. And we have many more. So in our portfolio, we have about 500,000 products, and we can do a lot of customization. If you think about what I was saying about military, their frequency range is very broad because you need to escape from jamming. And so you keep fluctuating between the different frequency band. So you need a lot of hardware to support that. So in a nutshell, we support many different functions into a drone. And by the way, we talked about drone, but we have also some on the sea, and then some under the water. So, which also we support with our broad portfolio. And we have a specialized team that is supporting that market.
Yeah, this is another area where I think folks who do not work in maybe military aerospace or maybe pay attention to it aren't aware of, but that's unmanned submersibles. And then yes, the most recent one that I've heard of, which you actually did mention, was unmanned ground systems, but not necessarily humanoid robotics. And I think this is where you start to get back into Terminator land, where you start to think of an autonomous tank or something like this.
Yes, we are moving more into the military here again. But I mean, if you look at the conflict in Ukraine, what that conflict has taught all of us, I mean, maybe not all of us, but many, is that the battlefield becomes a very dangerous place for human. In fact, the chance to survive for a fighter on the ground is very limited. And so everybody's developing this ground system to be able to, I call it a war of robots. So we'll have robots fighting against each other, and then depending who's winning that, then the human will move on and occupy the land or reclaim the land, whatever it is that happens. And I see that as a progress. I would rather have a robot fighting than humans.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would. I mean, it's the less bad outcome yes, yeah, of having a war. Of course, we'd all prefer that there wasn't war, but unfortunately,
yeah, absolutely.
We live in a dangerous world, right?
we would prefer to only talk about civilian application for unmanned system, but unfortunately, war has been something that the humanity has been doing over and over the course of since we have been on Earth.
Let's end on a positive note.
Yes, absolutely.
You help. I'm sure you help a lot of different types of companies. What types of companies does Infinite help? Startups, established companies, large enterprises?
That's a great question, and we started this conversation by talking about disruption. And so, Infinite, we have been serving these very established companies over the course of decades. But with this unmanned system, human robot, and so on, we see the rise of a startup and basically disrupting the incumbent. And again here, if I look at Underhill, they were able to develop a collaborative combat aircraft CCA in less than 2 years. So that's really exciting. That's what really excites me in this market, is the pace of change. And when I visit our customers or companies, see all the new things that people are doing that 10 years ago I would have never thought about. And so we are really serving this newer company. So what are their characteristics and why we fit well with them is because they change design very quickly. They don't wait for DOW or someone to tell them what to do, or the first responder, or maybe they talk to them on a daily basis, in fact. And then they find out, oh, we flew a drone yesterday over a crime scene, or something happened, or two people beating each other. And we learn about that. Oh, how can we improve the drone, or whichever unmanned system we develop. And I love that fast pace of designing quick, implementing new feature, which could be software, hardware. And we are great at supporting them with our product portfolio and having products available. And then what I find fascinating is creating an industry with our customers. How often in your life, business life, you can say, oh, I was part of an industry that started, it was nothing, to it was at scale. And so that's really the challenge. How do we support this design requirement evolving permanently, but also scaling up? And that's really very interesting. And this is, by the way, happening in the US, happening in Europe, happening everywhere. We are witnessing the birth of an industry, the drone, unmanned system, but also a new economy, the low altitude economy. Think about internet in the 90s. We are seeing the same right now. That's really exciting and positive. And we can do a lot of good stuff with unmanned systems.
Yeah, I think the future is really bright. You've mentioned some great applications, and I think I think we're all going to be surprised at what comes next, and I think it's going to be surprised in a good way. Gabriel, thank you so much for being with us today. I think you kind of gave yourself a little bit of a challenge here to see how well some of this industry develops here in the U.S. over the next 5 years. So maybe we won't have to wait 5 years to have you come back on. We can have you come back on sooner than that, and we can talk about how some of this stuff is developing.
Absolutely. I'm sure that in 2 years it will be different. Think about 2 years ago and where we are today. But Zach, it was a pleasure to be with you here and exchange about this interesting industry and economy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Bye.
To everyone that's out there listening, we've been talking with Gabriel Guglielmi, VP of Global Product Management at Infinite Electronics. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You'll be able to keep up with all of our podcast episodes and tutorials as they come out. And last but not least, don't stop learning, stay on track, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.